In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
The ruling on the field stands.
We deliver jerseys, funny foam fingers, and everything you need for the game. But what you really get is so much more.
FedEx Delivery.
Game day spirit. What we deliver by delivering.
Welcome back to a special edition of the Daily Memphian Memphis Tigers podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, and I'm joined over the phone by Jonah Jordan, the Memphis Tigers football beat writer. Is there anything going on today, Jonah, or is there a reason why we're recording this special podcast?
I don't think so. I thought we just wanted to talk to each other.
Oh, wait. James Wiseman has left the University of Memphis, which is obviously a huge bummer for just about everyone involved, to go prepare and get ready for the NBA draft. He bounced out of here yesterday. People were sending me pictures of him in the airport in the morning, which was a little odd, and you kind of knew something was going on. And so now we just wanted to hop on here, share a little insight into the situation that I've heard over the past day, and then get some thoughts from Jonah. I guess the best place to start would be, obviously this is a decision for James that financially makes a lot of sense. He now does not have to pay back the money that he owed the NCAA, although I don't think that was originally the problem and like the reason why he left. He now can sign endorsement deals, make money that way. He can take gifts from an agent. He can make money that way. He could get a shoe deal like RJ Hampton got. And so, and now he does not have to worry about injury. And so my understanding is, and I don't think this was not a class thing. It was not a grades thing. He had a good GPA this last semester. So it wasn't something like that. This is not, to this point, a sanctions thing either, I've been told. Now that this does not mean that that couldn't come further down the line. Like, that's still on the table, unfortunately. But in the moment, that's not what this is right now. This was a decision that James made financially. Well, James's camp made financially. And I think it's very unfortunate for everyone involved. In terms of how this thing happened, it was very interesting. You know, to say that the coaches didn't know that this was coming, I don't think that's entirely fair. Like as if this was a massive surprise yesterday. It was obviously a surprise to the rest of us, judging by the fact that he just posted it on Instagram and social media blew up. But in terms of what the coaches expected this to happen for a couple days, I believe. And so when it happened, sort of the way that it happened yesterday was kind of surprising, but the decision for him to no longer be at Memphis and get prepared for the NBA draft is a decision that was not surprising at that point.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that was surprising was the timing, right? Like, why did he wait till now? He has how many games left on the suspension? Like, he's going to be playing before the start of the next semester or very close to it. It just seemed very strange to me, and that's why it kind of came out of left field for everybody, because why do this right now when you are close to playing?
Yeah, and look, I would be lying if I said that there wasn't some disappointment on the Memphis side about the decision, because I've heard it. And so, and I think the timing actually had a lot to do with that, because I believe that Memphis thinks, had James Wiseman's suspension not been as long as it was, had it been 6 games or whatever, he would have spent less time sitting around and sort of, watching his teammates do what they're doing and everything else, and having people try and get in his ear about making the next step and whatnot. And so the longer he had to sit there and listen to that, the more sort of detrimental I'm sure it was to Memphis. So the timing is, yes, it's in question. I think the timing is a big reason why they're so disappointed that this was the eventual decision. But at the same time, I'll say this: that doesn't mean that they're not going to wish James the best. Like you're not going to hear anything but this coaching staff, on all accounts, and the university take the high road on this and wish James the best, and say they want the best for his future, and that this was his decision, and that this is what they were going to do. So I think that's exactly what you're going to hear. You're not going to hear anything else. And now we'll take a break for a quick message from our sponsor.
The Daily Memphian Tigers podcast is brought to you by FedEx. Possibilities. What we deliver by delivering.
Jonah, what did you make of this decision yesterday? What was your initial reaction, and do you think it's right? My
initial reaction was, why didn't he do this when this in November or October? Why didn't he do this sooner, when it was so clear that he wasn't going to play for a while? Why did it happen now? And I think I have my suspicions. I think it probably had a lot to do with his grades, or some to do with his grades. I know James is very studious and very concerned about it.
I've been directly told that that's not the case with this.
No,
I don't think it has anything to do with his grades.
He wanted to finish the semester, and then the Cole Anthony injury. Cole Anthony, a top-rated prospect, he just got hurt, and they know each other. I mean, I'm sure it had an effect on him. It's been the biggest one of those things rolling around, like, hey, this kid got hurt. It could cost him money. It could cost him a spot in the draft. Not like a big spot, like the kid's going to go in the top 10 because he's really good. But there's a lot of unknowns if you keep playing. I mean, like, there's a lot of unknowns if you stay, and if what happens if he comes back and gets hurt. I think that probably factored into this decision. I think it's a very tough spot for James. I think he was in an incredibly difficult position. And then he decided to go do what's best for him, or what he felt was best for him. He's going to go make some money now. The timing was just the weirdest thing. And then the way it was reported, the way Shams went out and did it, and then the Instagram posts. I do wonder, and you can elaborate on this a little bit more than me. How do you mentioned his teammates a little bit, but do you think that there is any resentment over there? I mean, I know they're going to say the right things, they're going to do the right things, but I mean, a lot of these guys were recruited here by James. A lot of these guys wouldn't be here in Memphis without him. Like, is there any kind of like, man, I can't believe he just left us high and dry like that?
Look, of course there's disappointment. Like, that's just natural, right? That's just how a human being would feel in a situation like this. Like, of course there's disappointment. I also think, to a certain extent, especially when Memphis is dealing with the situation that they're dealing with, at some point during this long of a suspension, the team has to move on, and I think that they did. And I think that the sort of the immediate plan of not having James Wiseman in the lineup became sort of the norm, and I'm sure that probably didn't feel great for James, I'm sure. But at the same time, no, like I don't think there's going to be a huge resentment, just because a lot of these guys share the same sort of dream of making it to the NBA. And so if James does that, then, how can they blame him if they have the exact same goal? And if they were in the same position, they might do the same thing. I do think that's the case. Another thing that you mentioned, though, that I think is very interesting, and I think you're spot on this, is that Cole Anthony injury. Because as James sits out and he watches this, and he has to listen to people in his ear and in his camp's ear try and say, and that's just part of the game. Like, every player has people in their ear, by the way. Like Ryan Boyce who transferred had people in his ear, right? So that's just part of the game. But as he sort of sat there and wondered what was going to happen to his draft stock and what was going to come next, I think Memphis, I know Memphis, went out of their way to try and get and prove to James that if he were to come back and play, and even if he were to play poorly, he's still going to be a top 3 pick. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to leave. Like this is why you should come back, because we have NBA connections, and our NBA connections are telling us that you're going to be a top 3 pick no matter what. They all saw you at the pro day. They know your physical tools. You're going to be a top 3 pick no matter what. And you can only say that so much, and it's whether James wants to believe that or not. And I'm sure he had people on either side pulling him different directions when it comes to that. And I think that Cole Anthony injury may have been a bit of a wake-up call, because he's now watching a guy that he knows personally that was also a big high school prospect at the same time as him get hurt and his draft stock be affected. So even when he hears those guarantees or those promises, hey, look, James, you are a top 3 pick no matter what. If you should stay with us, you should continue to play at Memphis, you should continue to play college basketball, because it doesn't really matter, how good or bad you play, you have the physical tools where you're going to get picked. Well, watching somebody get injured, I'm sure did not help that whatsoever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I wonder how this does impact, like what effect does it have on Jalen Green? He is obviously the top prospect. Memphis doesn't have any commits in their class currently. I mean, Jalen Green and James Wiseman were obviously very close. I mean, this obviously, like, I know they weren't going to play together, but I think this does impact Jalen Green's decision a little bit. Does it not? Like, I think those two have a bearing on what each other do. I'm not saying James is going to say, hey, Jalen, don't go to Memphis, but I think his decision could impact Jalen Green down the line. It will. I mean, I think for a fact. What do you think? Because I think that right now Memphis, that puts Memphis in an even worse spot recruiting-wise, because Penny's looking around trying to find guys they've missed on several big-time prospects. I know we talked about it last week. This opens up an obvious scholarship and an obvious need that you already knew you were going to have, but now that need and that spot become even more glaring, even more obvious.
No, I think you're right. And I would take it a step further. I would say that not only does James's decision, and eventually maybe Cole Anthony, if he decides he's not going to play for North Carolina again, not only do they impact, a decision that Jalen Green might make, which clearly, he would consider playing professional basketball. Because now you think about it. Think about this. Think about the Unicorn fam, right? Think about that visit last September that had Jalen Green, RJ Hampton, and James Wiseman all on campus, posing together for pictures, throwing up the unicorn. None of those guys are playing college basketball. Or if Jalen decides not to play college basketball, none of them would. So now Jalen Green has watched the two people in front of him who he's friends with take alternate routes. And I wrote about this yesterday when I talked about James making the decision financially. And unconventional is becoming conventional when you're talking about these sort of things, because there's ample proof now that these elite college basketball prospects just do not need college basketball. And that's just the truth. And it is unfortunate for the fans. It's unfortunate for the college coaches, but you would hope something would change where events like this don't happen, because James wanted to play college basketball. He clearly wanted to play college basketball, but he never really got a fair shake to do it. And that's super, super unfortunate. And I do think this impacts recruiting. It could impact Jalen Green, who, yes, is going to consider going pro, and it could impact other elite prospects too, as they look at what's going on and make their own decision on whether or not to play in college. And, that's just terrible for the fans.
Yeah. And I think it kind of put Memphis behind the 8 ball a little bit with guys, because it does sound like they have been holding out hope with Jalen Green. Are there any other prospects on the board does it affect Greg Brown, or does it, who else do they have out there that they are looking at?
Well, they have Greg Brown. Obviously, Jalen Green and Greg Brown are the two guys that you'd hope end up at Memphis. I don't know. I feel like Greg Brown's probably going to go to college. So we'll see. But landing a prospect like Jalen Green is exactly like landing a prospect like James Wiseman. You know, it helps you build around your top guy. And so, you know, it's going to be a lot harder to get a guy like Craig Brown if Jalen Green isn't in the fold anymore. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, you know, I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility, certainly after all this. So
on the floor, let's talk about on the floor a little bit, because that's what's most important right now. There is a season going on. They just obviously won a big game on the floor. I mean, we've seen what this team looks like. Can they get any better, or are they what we have seen all season? Is the team we saw against Tennessee what we're going to see down the line, or can they get better? Are there ways that they can kind of start getting together? I think obviously the shooting can get better, but what does this team look like without James Wiseman? What's the ceiling? Can Precious Achiuwa play better? Is he a 5? Is he a 4? I think there are a lot of questions, but what does it look like to you? Because to me, it looks like the team we've seen with, they try and play lockdown defense. They're going to play fast. They just need to start hitting some shots. They need their guard play to be way better.
Yeah, I think, yes, they can be better. I mean, obviously losing James Wiseman is a massive hit. It's like there's no other way around it. Like it's a huge hit to your future prospects here and what you can accomplish by the end of the year. I think they'll go a number of ways to try and replace him. Obviously at this point, it looks like DJ and Precious are going to be your best front court, and probably your front court that's going to be in the game late. But yes, there's room to improve, because look at what Isaiah Maurice and Lance Thomas have done this year. Not much, right? They've kind of struggled. And so if they play better, your front court is going to be better than it is right now. But obviously the ceiling is a whole lot lower when James Wiseman isn't in the picture. And look, Precious is playing great right now. He's like a walking double-double every game. It's relatively easy for him to just go in and grab 13 rebounds, it looks like. And he's got a great motor. So, yeah, I think that they can improve, although I think the ceiling is obviously much lower without James.
Yeah, and that ceiling, obviously, that you're talking about the NCAA tournament, that is the ultimate goal this season for everyone involved.
They're still a tournament team.
That kind of impacts it. They're still going to make the tournament. I think they'll still probably win the American Athletic Conference, but they probably will drop some games they wouldn't have if James had been in the fold, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they go. All right, that'll do it for us today from this special emergency James Wiseman edition of the podcast. This is going to be our podcast for the holidays. We're going to take a break next week, and then we'll come back immediately after the Cotton Bowl to talk that and some more Tigers basketball ahead of the Georgia game. So thanks for listening. You can get this podcast or any other Daily Memphian podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. Happy holidays.
We deliver tickets, team merchandise, and everything you need for the game. But what you really get is so much more.
FedEx Delivery.
Game day spirit. What we deliver by delivering.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.